I am heavy
bored.
I may say that the male is entirely hostile. No!
Resources.
Life with friends is boring. We must not say so.
Alright, just say something into the mic.
Farts.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
Farts.
Yeah, I just needed
Farts. Like where do I need to be? Like do I need to be shooting like in front of it or like
No, you're
directly
good.
into it?
No, you're good. It's just for the little recording software. I just test the lines to make sure that we're having anything come through at all, So we're actually
Yeah, man. I had to
recording.
record this like welcome message for this training. And I recorded it and the audio was shit. It was like so obnoxiously loud and like kind of muffled sounding. I was like, damn, my toe is all fucked up.
What'd you do to it?
Fell down the stairs.
That like ladder?
Yeah. But like only at the very bottom, so it was really sad. It was more like I stubbed my toe into the floor. Like sliding off the stairs.
Yeah,
It's purple as shit.
I actually stubbed my toe last night before bed. It started bleeding. I like hit it right at the right place on like the like the couch leg, which is like an inch big. Like, like an inch and a half, 2 inches off the ground. So there's barely enough space for me to hit my toe on it, and I hit my pinky toe.
Yeah, this is my ring toe. Yeah, look at that shit.
Fucking nasty shit.
Yeah, look at that. It's a clear, distinct color difference.
Is it broken?
It might be. I don't know.
Can you
I can
move
move it though.
Yeah, well then it's probably not broken if you can move it.
Yeah, well, there's more than one bone.
That's true. But usually if you move it, you'd be in immense pain if it was broken.
Yeah, I assume so.
Yeah. Usually if it's broken up, like you really can't move it. Like you'd be really...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, it fucking hurts.
Yeah, dude.
It sucks.
Toes are so vulnerable. So vulnerable.
I have to deal with emails from my shitty students telling me they still don't know how to use... Like, they still don't know how to submit work. We're on week 10. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, damn. That sounds like 10 weeks of work you didn't turn in. Don't you think you should do something about it?
Well, that's what always irritates me too, is like I get most of these are freshmen, but they're always talking about some bullshit. Like, oh, I don't know how to do it. I was like, man, like there are literally like hundreds of YouTube videos that show you how to use this software. Like,
but what's worse is when like you hand them solutions to that problem and they're like, I don't know how to do it. Like they just wait 10 days and then email you again saying the exact same thing. And you're like, dude, you're just like ignoring every time I send you a solution and then just emailing me again to be like, I don't know.
it's just like little kids.
It's so fucking annoying. By the way, I don't turn my camera on in class because like I'm anxious. And I'm like, yeah, everyone is anxious. Get over it. Turn on your fucking camera.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I refuse.
You're just giving me excuses over and over for why you're not participating in the class that you signed up for.
Oh, yeah, man. That's what I always say when they say they can't do it. I'm like, what, did you try? Or you just want me to give you the answer? I'm like,
yeah, I should start asking them that.
Same thing I say to my nephews when they ask me to do something for them. Yeah, my nephews are like under like 9 years old. So.
Well, I just keep asking them like, so what specifically don't you understand? And then they just don't answer. Like, what are you struggling with?
We just had a peer review last week, and we ran out of time because I was covering this article that they're using as a source, and I was like showing them how to pull out quotes, like what I would do, whatever, and then we had like 20 minutes left, which is usually not as much time as I'd like for like peer review, and I'll go around and just be like, hey, you have questions, you want me to check anything or anything you're freaking out about, And this one girl just hands me her essay, and it's just like, I was like, yeah, okay. Well, what are you worried about? What do you want me to check? And she's just like, can you just read it? And I was like, no, I'm asking you. What do you want me to look at? Like, I don't have time to read all this shit right now.
I hate
Like,
that.
yeah, I'm like, be a little proactive here. Like, I'm like, it's not up to me.
It's so annoying. They think they're entitled to that.
It's not even like entitlement. I know that's like the thing we always, oh, millennials and Gen Z were so entitled, but like, it's more of just like this larger problem of us not allowing people to do it on their own, or I don't know, it's like this fear of doing it. I guess the fear of failure, but it's
Well, we're just hand holding more and more.
right, it's just they don't know how to do it without being guided or
And
yeah,
I'm just like,
handheld.
wait, what? No one taught me how to use Blackboard.
Right.
Like, not when I was a student. Like, no one taught me. I didn't take a class on like how to get my student email working, you know? Just through a number of different like processes, I figured that out, you know? No one taught me how to use Blackboard when I had to use it to teach either.
Yeah, although they did send a bunch of instructional videos. I remember when I first had to use Canvas, they gave me this like stupid like printed out like pamphlet almost on how to use Canvas, and like none of it was useful. It was all like their stupid little bonus features that they have there that I just never
Yeah, and
use.
like
And
all of the shit that you actually need, like yeah, it can be cool to like learn some of the other shit that can be like helpful, whatever. A majority of it, like if you have any familiarity with like the primary things that you need and do in a class generally, like you can figure out how to do it on an LMS. Like it's not, why is clicking around that hard?
oh, dude, I mean, it's not even that. I think it's a wider
Why,
cultural cultural
like why are the
phenomenon.
children born of the internet
So dumb.
like so unable to like figure out how to use this fucking LMS that I learned in like 2 days?
Right. It's because they don't actually know how to use the internet. I mean, like they don't. Like it's this weird thing. I haven't really seen anybody go into this, but yeah, I mean, most people, that includes younger, like millennials and Gen Z, like they don't have any fucking idea how to use a lot of this technology. I mean, dude, most of my colleagues don't even know how to use a lot of this technology, like when they're
Oh,
trying to do
no
these
way.
online Zoom classes and stuff.
In the meetings whenever someone asks a question, it's always one guy and they're always asking the same shit over
Yeah,
and over again, and it's always something really stupid and self-explanatory. It's so fucking frustrating.
yeah, I don't get it. Yeah, like I said, I think it has to be like a larger cultural phenomenon. I don't understand it. Like this technology is supposed to make everybody's life easier and better and more efficient,
But
whatever.
there's this whole like, oh well, they all need to be like oriented to the LMS or whatever it is, right? They need to be oriented to the technology. And it's like, do they?
Right.
Or like, can you just kind of throw them in and have them figure it out? Because I kind of feel like you can mostly throw them in and tell them that they have to figure it out. And if you said you're doing this for a grade, you're figuring this out for a grade, they would figure it out.
Yeah. Uh, Although some of them aren't even doing that. Uh,
It's like, I don't know how.
yeah, it's a
I
very
don't know how to move my mouse and click around. And
right. It's partly. I mean, this leads me to a bigger like theory I have, but this kind of like pretending that like any type of technological like software or equipment is innovation. It's just like a larger thing I keep seeing is like we keep pretending that like just because it's like on a phone now, or like a PDF menu on a phone, all this goddamn shit we had to deal with, like I just am just like this isn't better, like it's
well,
not more
my
efficient.
favorite is like, meet them where they're at. You know, they're
Yeah.
all online. Why aren't we doing more things online?
Yeah, video essays and shit. Well, that too, and then you can look at the prevailing wisdom of particularly our field and how to teach it. Uh, it's a lot of evidence-free assertions about how technology is good or whatever, just to, like technology for technology's sake. That's what I mean. Like we pretend that it's
That's my entire
innovation.
practicum.
Yeah, we pretend it's innovation, but it's not really, like it's not really making it easier or better or more efficient or helping everybody understand. Like it's just another thing that they can sell to education departments or like uh yeah, secondary ed schools. uh
Well, they're gonna do whatever
just more software. I mean, do you remember like,
attracts the most enrollment.
yeah, I mean, this
Also,
was right, you and I were in college and then into grad school, right? As like those smart boards started to become a thing, right? Like those like Prometheus boards and like they're all pieces of shit. Like like
it's like those
Prometheus.
fancy like chalkboards that aren't chalkboards that slide around and light up and shit.
It's like, yeah, it's like they call it, the one we I had to deal with was called the Prometheus board, and it's just basically, yeah, a whiteboard but like on a screen. So it's a projector that you can like write on with like the stupid
Yeah.
tools that they give you that never work. They
Yeah.
had like some stupid pointer that just never worked and never, you couldn't
Fuck that.
actually highlight and use it, and nobody on staff seemed to know how to use it. So it was basically just a very expensive projector screen.
Yeah, we just had like smart podiums
Yeah, we have that,
that
but
also had a computer, and our podiums were in the back of the classroom, so you didn't teach from the front.
wow, that's
You taught
stupid.
from the back,
Wow.
basically next to the students sitting in the back of the classroom.
I guess that works better for other subjects, but it definitely doesn't work for English, dude. I mean, that is not. It
It
just
just
like,
wasn't effective. Like I get it for like groups, but it didn't strike me as being more effective unless you are like your entire class is like, all right, everyone get into groups and we're going to do this activity and then we're going to talk about it and now get back into your groups and this is going to be a semester long thing.
yeah.
I hate those classes.
What's what I mean? If it's a class where you just have to memorize facts and then regurgitate them onto a test, like it's one thing to be able to like lecture from the back with PowerPoint screens, but like that's not how you
But even
teach.
then, that
Yeah,
doesn't necessarily make it better. Like they want you in the
gotcha.
back to like, you know, make the instructor a facilitator, not like have it be a power position, you know? Make it learner centered and not instruction centered.
Whatever the fuck that means. Like,
Yeah. Well,
bunch of
that's what
fancy
it all was. It
buzzwords.
was like just, put them in groups, be at the back of the classroom, and somehow this will put them at the front and like make them have discussion more and shit. I'm like, does it? I mean, it definitely makes it easier for me to walk around the classroom. Like, I didn't mind that. Yeah, I didn't give a shit.
Well, I
But
mean,
it's like when I'm talking, if I'm like trying to explain something on a slide, like I'm still going to the front of the room to point at shit and like talk to like,
right.
it wasn't any different. It's just like they have a harder time knowing where to look. Do they look at me or do they look at the screen?
Yeah, I don't use PowerPoints at all, so I hate those types of things. But I mean, you and I both know. I mean, especially in grad school, when I first had to read some of the pedagogy stuff, of which there's entire fields and departments dedicated
Ugh.
to. Uh, it's all evidence free, dude. I mean, it's just all the latest trend. They don't have to provide statistics or data that shows this improves learning
They don't have to
outcomes.
provide
Yeah.
opposing arguments.
Well, not even that. I mean, you would just like to think a little bit of evidence, be like, well, look, we saw, like a 10% increase in student engagement, or we saw a 10% increase in like grade point averages, like
Yeah, because
anything.
now all freshmen get iPads. At UK, at the University of Kentucky, all freshmen
Really?
got iPads. Like my
Wow.
last year in Kentucky, I think.
Holy shit.
It's
I
like
guess
Jesus.
I guess schools that have a lot of money are the only ones that can do that. So something like a big flagship research institution for a state
Yeah.
that gobbles up all the funding. Yeah, I don't know.
Wild.
It's just crazy to me that that's allowed to just flourish, that whole field of mostly grift. I mean, people can just say whatever they want and just invent some new education strategy and just claim that it's better, like
We
that it's
study
innovative.
memes.
Yeah, yeah. And there's with no evidence to support it, no improved outcomes, nothing. It just, especially when I had to read pedagogy in grad school, I was just like, the evidence they provided was a couple students thought it was really neat. It was really cool. They really enjoyed it. A few students came and spoke to me after class, and that's all the evidence they provide in all of basically composition pedagogy. I'm not sure about other subjects just because I'm not familiar with it, but it's insane. It's my whole
We
thing
had
on that.
speakers come to our pedagogy class.
What they speak about.
Just dumb shit about tech in the classroom.
Yeah, video
or
essays.
something.
Yeah, yeah, dude, that's what it always is. It's
Like,
yeah.
their research about tech in the classroom. It's always kind of bullshit, though. I was like, I get it. You teach at Michigan. Great.
And it's
I'm
always
glad their
yeah.
writing center is flourishing.
People that teach at Michigan and barely have to interact with students because they have like 5 TAs that do all that for them, and they just give their hour-long lecture and then go into their office and go give speaking engagements at other universities about how great they are at their innovative technology that doesn't actually improve
this
anything.
is also the class in which every single class, for the most part, we would have to all sit there and type responses to questions in a Google Doc and like respond to each other in the Google Doc and then have that same conversation again out loud. And that was
yeah.
And I was like, is this really the best use of tech in the classroom, in your opinion?
I mean, I guess that's as good as it's going to get. It's a lot of, it's a lot of hackery. I wonder, we should start a segment that's like teaching complaints, a bitch session.
I'm sure our respective institutions would really appreciate that.
My respective institution doesn't know who the fuck I am, dude. Like,
yeah, that's true. Neither does mine.
I walked into the office at the start of the semester because they changed books. So they're giving me like the new book they wanted me to use. And I was talking to my chair. I was like, hey, I was just stopping by to get the books. I got to prep the class. I remember we changed the book. And she's like, who are you? And I told her, and then she like handed me the book. And then I walked out, and she probably still doesn't know. Like if I went there next semester, she'd be like, who are you?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm just the guy you pay, bullshit minimum wage to teach these courses you charge thousands of dollars for.
Yeah.
Give me like 5%. Not even.
Yeah.
That could be interesting.
Yeah, it would be fun.
Yeah, dude. I mean, the teachers would like it.
Teaching complaints.
I mean, yeah.
Teacher gripes.
That's all our pedagogy class
School
was.
gripes.
Yeah. In grad school. So, I mean, people would have to listen to this for us to even actually have any type of like, oh, maybe we'd get in trouble.
Yeah, right now we're just yelling into the ether about why school is stupid. And also we haven't stopped attending it.
Yeah. It does feel feckless, too. Like, it feels increasingly like there's no way to make a living out of it. That's really my biggest thing.
Yeah, it's getting increasingly lamer.
Well, not even lame, because I don't mind all that, like whatever, the stupid trainings and stuff. Like, I don't even mind teaching. Like, I enjoy it, and but I mean, you just can't make a living. I mean, I'm teaching a full course load now as an adjunct, but
Yeah.
still can't. I mean, you still can't.
And you're barely making part-time money.
Right, like you can't.
Working full-time.
And if I got a full course load next semester too, which I'm not going to, like they're not, like I'm going to get maybe 2 courses probably in the spring because there's less enrollment. But
Yeah.
it's like, I'd make less than $30,000 a year, so I could literally work a fast food job full time and make the same amount of money, if not more, with like overtime and shit. So it's increasingly, but well, I don't want to get too far into it, but yeah, dude, and then the PhD industrial complex just keeps on churning. So I mean, it's not like it's going to get any easier. It's only going to get more competitive, more difficult. Uh, Thousands of applicants fighting over one spot,
Yep.
and that's just going to get worse. So, yeah, definitely at a crossroads. So subscribe to our podcast so that we can keep teaching.
And making
Patreon.com.
no money.
Yeah. Patreon.com. Heavy board.
So, what are we talking about this week, Andy?
Today we're talking about Brigit Pegeen Kelly's The Orchard. I guess we should, we're getting ahead of ourselves. I guess we should say what podcast this is.
This is Heavy Board. I'm Sophie Weiner.
And I'm Andrew Woodstadt. And today we're going over The Orchard by Brigit Pegeen Kelly, a collection of poetry, our first official collection of poetry for episode 4 here.
So I should probably state before I read this little bio in the back of the book that needs a bit of an update because Brigit Pegeen Kelly is dead.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not funny, but it's,
It's funny.
what you gonna do?
It's not funny that she's dead. It's funny the way it was phrased.
Yeah, so she is no longer with us. She died in 2016. I mean, she wasn't that old. She was like in her 60s.
What did she die of? Do we know?
Well, we don't know. But she was teaching in the creative writing program at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Her first collection was called To the Place of Trumpets. That was selected, I think, by James Merrill for the Yale series of younger poets in 1987.
Shit.
Her second book, Song, came out from Boa Editions in 1994. And this book, when's this book from?
2004, I think.
2004. Yeah, so a whopping decade after her second book came out, she put this one out. This is her third book, The Orchard. Some reviews might suggest that all three of her books are her trying to write the same poem over and over again. I, in some ways, agree, in some ways disagree. I don't always think that's a bad thing, but hey, you decide for you.
Yeah. So where should we start with this, Soph? I wrote down a lot of themes. You have a list of things. I guess we don't want to go over all of the poems.
We definitely can't go over all of the poems. I mean, these poems are pretty sprawling.
Yeah.
They're
some-
both, I mean, they're not like all very long poems. I would not necessarily describe them as long, but, a lot of them are at least a page or more. And they take up, a good chunk of page. So, yeah, we definitely can't get through all of these, but I think that we can be selective and go through a few. I do want to talk about the first poem because I think that's always sort of important for understanding how to read the rest of the book. I think it's always like the best place to start. And sort of introduces us to some of the major themes.
Do you want to just do general thoughts before we get in?
Yeah, actually, I thought I would let you start with general thoughts. I mean, about the book, or...
Yeah, just what you thought of it. This is our both of us have read this before, although it's been quite some time since I've actually picked it up to read it before we did this. Probably like 5, 6 years since I'd read it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, when I first read this book, I was pretty blown away by it. So like 5 or 6 years ago, and then this time I was texting Sophie. I was just uh wasn't as into it as I was last time. I guess that always is the case. I don't know. I found myself a little frustrated with the book, but it's also just maybe my personal problem.
I mean, as I was finishing it up, like, yeah, I mean, I totally understand some of your frustrations. Like, I get where it comes from. They're not, like, baseless.
Yeah, I'm just in that stage right now with the hatred of poetry.
Yeah, you hate poetry. I'm really attracted to
Well,
reading poetry that is about poetry, which
well,
is what I think most of this book is about.
dude, I'm telling you, every time I bring up how like the hatred, I was like, well, I guess we have to reach out to Ben Lerner, dude, have him come on.
Do we want to talk to Ben Lerner? Yeah, we do.
I guess.
We do. I want the world to believe that I do.
Yeah, I mean, I'd talk to anybody. I don't care if they talk to us. Is really the thing, dude. I mean, send that
Ben
email.
Lerner with his
Yeah,
Guggenheim.
yeah. He's just gonna blow that off. He doesn't give a shit about that email we send. Yeah,
Ben
just
Lerner with his many novels
yeah. It's like I would
that may
expect.
or may not be about himself.
Yeah, I would expect just a blow off for that. Be like, who the fuck is this? Heavy board. Fuck this
Yeah.
podcast. Although, in my experience, dude, most writers aren't asked for interviews that often, so they're very eager to give them if you ask. At least that's been my experience.
Definitely poets.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess if you're very, like, if you're at that
If you're
level,
fiction, if you're
yeah.
like a fiction writer who's doing well, you know.
Although, when I was running a literary journal in grad school, I remember I emailed a few to interview, and they were just email interviews, and a couple of them said sure, and then another one said yes, and then it just blew me off. So you never
Yeah, I
really know.
encountered that
Yeah,
too. I remember one poet who said an emphatic yes.
right.
That might have not been for an interview though. I might have been soliciting her work.
Well, I usually did both.
I always tried to solicit their work first, and if they declined, I requested an interview.
Yeah, what did you think, Soph, of the book, The Orchard?
Yeah, I still like it. I mean, I spent a lot of time with this book the first time that I read it, so there are poems that I think I'll just love forever. There are poems that mm, like I will say where this book ends is not my favorite place in the book, and I feel like in the best books, if it ends well, like if I'm really pumped by the ending poem, like it's usually a pretty good book. I don't think this book ends in its strongest place.
Well, yeah, that's interesting because I did sense kind of a shift in section 3 of the book, but I guess we'll get to that. Uh,
So yeah, it's split into four sections, which I didn't really realize until I reread it. I thought it was just three, but it's four.
well, the
I
last one
think
is just one long poem by
the
itself.
last one
Yeah.
is just one long poem by itself, and that is the poem that I do not think is like the strongest poem in the collection that it could have ended on. Like even some of, it doesn't have you don't have to end with your absolute best poem, but
Right.
it should be one of your best poems.
Yeah, that's kind of a trend. Not like a trend, but I don't know if it's just like a trend or like a trap that we writers tend to fall into with the endings of things.
What
It's
ending on like your strongest on one of
no
your strong
ending on something that's just a little lackluster. I remember thinking
Oh
this
yeah,
for a
yeah.
couple poetry books that I've read, where like you're just blazing through because it's great, and then you get to that last poem, and a lot of times it just maybe it crumbles a little bit, or it's just doesn't finish as strong as the rest of the book had been going. But I don't want to name names because we're only going over this one book here.
I
But
mean, yeah, I felt that way about I felt like this poem was like this collection was a little less good, just because of where it ended. But overall, I really like this. I think it's really, I mean, I think it's wildly original in its imagery. Um,
It is. Yeah.
but I do largely read it as an Ars Poetica,
Yeah.
like
You.
as a book about the art of poetry.
Yeah, and I think when you said that to me, it's definitely the most satisfying way to view it. Like it's the most satisfying way to read this book, I think.
I'm genuinely uncertain of how else to read it, and maybe that's a problem I have. I
Well,
think also the first time I read this, I was looking specifically for that. But
well, because it is a lot about creation. Like the first theme I wrote down in this, I wrote motherhood, giving birth, children. There's breasts and breast milk everywhere.
there's so much tits and babies.
Teats. The sweet,
Um,
sweet nectar of breast milk pouring,
Sometimes the tits are stone tits.
spraying,
Um,
spraying
Sometimes the
stones.
tits are filled with like rotten milk.
Heavy with milk, yeah. Veiny. Yeah, there's no veiny description, but yeah.
They're they're pretty much never sexy though. I don't think.
Yeah, it is a sterilized kind of thing, but like, yeah, and
Well,
it
I
goes
wouldn't even
along.
call it sterilized. It's just like supposed to be. It's always both like sort of. Well, she has like this weird grotesque quality
Which I'm
to
there
her writing
for.
where
Yeah.
everything is like simultaneously beautiful and rotting in turns.
Such is life. That's where I said like it does shift in section 3 where it gets I think it gets a lot more sexual in section 3 where there's actual like reference to the male member and female juices and oily slick like all that shit. I believe that's a direct line. Like the male member is oiled like from the female juices. Well, we'll get to that probably.
I just remember the furry sheath of the dog dick.
Yeah, the dog penis. Yeah, self. I always, but that's the thing too. And there's so much reference to like growing and blossoming and like gardens and plants. I mean, the book's called The Orchard, so yeah, I'd say Ars Poetica is the most satisfying way to look at it, or at least this idea of creation. Lots of reference, yeah.
Well,
To,
and what it means to create something and what you do with that creation or what that creation does. Um, so like the first poem of the first section is called Black Swan. It starts off with, I told the boy I found him under a bush, so already that's pretty loaded. So we're already sort of in a place of myth very, very early on, like from the jump.
yeah,
And I would argue that overall, yeah, I just see the words rank and sweet and stewed milk and all of those and bush and all of those things, all of those images strike me as being a very good summing up of the images of this collection.
yeah. And there are nods. Like I picked this up. I don't know enough about Greek mythology because it was one of those things that I purposely avoided in grad school and all. I've since tried to make up for that, but you definitely get references to this kind of like Greek mythology undertones, and there aren't. It's weird because they're not necessarily direct references, but this idea of swans and like babies being born out of animal
Oh yeah, there's the
feathers.
baby in the bush, and then we
Yeah,
also find that there's a swan with the baby. And so like I don't that feels like it could be a
nope.
nod to like Lita and the Swan.
That and it's even more like just so many of the gods in the Greek mythology were raised by animals or are part animal or are part human, part
Yeah.
god or whatever
Well,
it
and that's
is.
Lita and
Like
the Swan, right? Like Zeus takes the form of a swan and seduces Lita and impregnates her, and then she produces the twins that make up Gemini, but only one of them is Zeus's son.
yeah, like I said, I don't know enough about it, so that's my. Uh,
Neither do I. I looked that up specifically for this poem.
yeah, And I couldn't
But
really
like
find
you don't
enough. Yeah.
even then, like she would have to be very much toying with that story because in this poem, like there's this line of um yeah, I picked the boy up and slipped him into my belly the way one might slip something stolen into a purse. So that's still like, you know, doesn't exactly line up with the story of Lita and the Swan. Um,
And right there, I wanted to ask you because this is something that comes up just structurally in this entire book is her use of the ellipses.
yeah, I don't always agree with it, but
Well, I was going to ask you like what
I don't
is
mind it there.
yeah, well, I was going to like what it's used for because in this case, like if traditionally we accept that the ellipsis means something left out, I don't think she's quite using it like that. Maybe in this poem she is. Right there after that image you just read about the child into the belly like something stolen into a purse and brought him here, ellipsis, and so it was, and so it was. It kind of like so that implies more of a left out thing, but in some of the other poems, I think specifically it's used in a couple different ways. So I thought structurally the use of the ellipsis is one of the more interesting aspects. Uh,
Well, I mean, we see it in the next, just a few lines later
right,
on the next page, like the knocking of 1,000 wooden bells, ellipsis, things of such beauty.
right. It's almost like not so much in this poem because this poem doesn't really have well, a lot of these poems don't really have stanzas, but it almost seemed like she was using it as like a stanza break in some poems in particular.
Well, it's a slowing down. It feels like it's intended to slow us down. Or like a thought trailing off. Like there are thoughts, like there are a lot of gestures towards the self going through the process of thinking as they're making or writing or perceiving.
Right, or
And
just
sort of,
like a paragraph, like a change in subject. So it's like a change in direction, or that's why I said, in some cases they might be a stanza used as what a stanza break do the same thing almost. But because it's an ellipsis and not an actual stanza break, right? I think it's implied that it's doing more than just a stanza break would. Uh,
yeah, I agree. I mean, also there is like a way in which it almost feels like it's not stream of consciousness, but it has that effect. Um,
yeah,
I mean,
because I think the thing that is grounded, so when it grounds it in kind of the garden images, like the orchard, like it's mostly scenes as if a speaker was moving through this kind of weird dream garden. But I think there's also some type of grounding in this sense of like reoccurring characters, like the boy, the wolf, the sheep, the
yeah, well,
mother.
it's pulling these characters often out of pieces of art.
Is it?
Um, I think so.
I
I
didn't.
think a lot of these are referring to real figures in like Greek and Roman art. I don't think that
Right.
necessarily is all that important. Like, I don't think we have to know that, but like, I think there are like references to like Romulus and Remus,
Yeah, and the
and
wolf.
like all over the place. But there are also lots of made up ones.
Would you say this was very much influenced by like the romantic poets?
Maybe. What do you mean? Like
Just like in
concerned very
terms of
much
the
with the
references and
sublime?
like the kind of sacred, the sacredness of nature to some extent. I think she purposely obscures that, but it's like just a subtle influence. If it wasn't a main influence, you could
Sure. I
probably,
mean, I think it's there. Yeah, I mean, I think it's there. I think
and
there.
no doubt she was well read in that period and all that.
Oh,
Way better read than we are in it.
but yeah, there's a lot about sort of the act of. Well, I mean, so the first nod to sort of this strange garden was literally mentioned in the first poem. The bush was in a strange garden, a place so old it seemed to exist outside of time. In one spot, great stone steps leading nowhere. In another, statues of horsemen posting giant stone horses along a high wall. So it's sort of laying out the landscape for us in this first poem. and like identifying as like it seemed to exist outside of time, like we're in this strange place of myth. We're really concerned with things of beauty. And then we get, this boy that she took from the bush who she's like caring for, and describes his hair as a cap of shining feathers, as though he was born of this swan, which feels to me like a nod to Lita and the Swan. She says that he comes to me today weeping because some older boys had taunted him and torn his new coat. Had he not, when I bent my head to his head, said softly but with great anger, I wish I had never been born. I wish I were back under the bush. Which made the old garden rise up again, shadowed and more strange. So there's like, to me, I don't know, that signals like a nod to creation. I wish I was never born.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it has to be like all this goddamn birthing and like sex references, particularly into the third section, and breasts and breast milk. I mean, if we talk about what that symbolizes, right? Like literally, like life coming out of like, nourishment that you're getting. Women
Yeah, now the bush
lactating.
is flowerless.
Yeah.
Now there's no swan, there's no black swan. And then she could hear dark and low the giant stone hooves of the horses striking and striking the hardening ground.
Did she
So we're
have?
striking and striking the hardening ground. So that tells me like a world coming into the making, right? It's hardening.
Did she
It's
have
becoming
kids?
real. I don't know. I know she was married, but I don't know if she had kids.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know much about her personal life. But sometimes the personal life can be too distracting, specifically when we're trying to do like close readings of things. I think it's kind of, we see this in scholarship, particularly around literature all the time, where there's a lot of biographical interpretation that is masquerading as scholarship about a poem or a work or something like
People
that.
are just so fucking obsessed with themselves, dude.
Yeah, well,
That's
that
all it
too.
is.
Maybe that's where it stems from, yeah. But there is this
Of course it is.
tendency to extrapolate
Self-absorbed.
something. Yeah, just extrapolate whatever a reader wants from the
We want to write about
biography.
our experience, and
Yeah,
therefore we want to understand why our kind of experiences are important at large, as though they are, or why it's somehow significant in the writing world, why it's somehow my experience speaks to some larger experience that is dictating this trend we're seeing in the writing world. And I think that's very boring.
yeah. I mean, it is boring. I mean, most people's lives are boring. Like, this woman was literally a fucking teacher in Southern Illinois. I mean,
Yeah. Um,
and
the
for
second poem that we get right after, this striking and striking, the hardening ground. So, like, that image of, like, we got these stone horses at the beginning of that poem, and now these stone horses are striking and striking the hardening ground. So I have the sense of the world is like coming back into being. It's becoming real now. And then we get this poem, Blessed is the Field. And this is one of my favorites. I mean, this whole book rhythmically and in terms of sound is gorgeous. It definitely is playing with rhythm a lot. It's not it by any means is this like a highly, like a strictly formal or, you know, it's not a book that's like relying on meter, but there were moments that tripped me up where I was like, oh, well, although this poem is in tercets.
yeah, this is one of the few poems that does have this kind of like line structure in tercets. Like, for listeners that don't know what that is, it's just three line stanzas. So if a couplet is two line, a tercet is three line, so on and so forth. But it's one of the few that is where, and honestly, I thought a lot of what poems worked the most in this are the ones where she had a much looser structure. So the prose poems that really didn't make use of a traditional kind of poetic line. I thought that those worked structurally a little better. But that's interesting that this is the one that has some of the most structure, at least in terms of just like the line structure, how it is on the page with these tercets. Because all the rest are just kind of these long, if not prose poems, these kind of single stanzas that are very lengthy.
Except for Blacklegs.
Where's that?
17.
What do you want to talk about? The Blessed is the Field?
Yeah, I want to talk about Blessed is the Field. I mean, I like this poem a shitload. I mean, the lines that stand out to me the most, starting in line 3. So it starts with this description of the field, or of this sort of scenery, and the late heat, the snake root and the goldenrod run high, white and gold, the steaming flowers, green and gold, the acid-bitten leaves. And then we have this ellipsis, and it says, it is good to say first, an invocation. So this is where I'm again reading this as like calling this world into being. Like, look here, see this thing that I'm calling into being? Like, it is good to say first an invocation, right? Which is what a lot of poetry is. We can look at it as like an invocation of bringing something into the world.
And I do get this sense of very much open landscapes. And I mean, granted, as she spent most of her life, I don't know about most of her life, but at least probably while she was composing this book, she was living in southern Illinois. You think of the landscapes of these vast stretches of untouched, as a lot of places in the Midwest, right, are just untouched landscape, forest, plains.
Yep.
And you do get a vibe of that when she's talking about like the goldenrod, like the overgrown grasses and stuff in the sunlight. Like you can just drive anywhere and put those parts of the country and just see, like this pristine kind of. And I think, well, obviously that influences this because I mean your surroundings always influence what you're doing, but it really does. The streaming flowers, the goldenrod run high, the snake root, like just this like very kind of nature, open, pristine landscape.
Yeah, plus the rhythm of this poem just fucks.
Yeah, talk about the rhythm. I gotta pee. We're like fucking 40 minutes in. I already gotta pee.
Yeah, I mean, just the sound of this first beginning is great. In the late heat, the snake root and the goldenrod run high, white and gold, the steaming flowers, green and gold, the acid-bitten leaves. It is good to say first an invocation, though the words do not always seem to work. Still, one must try. So this is her invocation then. This is her calling the field into being, is what it feels like to me. And she goes on to sort of give us the rest of it, right? Bow your head, cross your arms, say, blessed is the day, and the one who destroys the day. So the rhythm of it is just incredible, and it sort of stays that way rhythmically throughout. Again, it's not really hanging on to a specific meter here, but it's really using the sounds of those words. And then again, even like this specific reference to words themselves, right? Though the words do not always seem to work, feels very much like a reference to writing a poem.
Yeah, and if we go broader, just straight up communication.
Yeah, the single golden black insect repeating its 2 lonely notes.
And it does have these references with Blessed is the Field. I mean, this pastoral kind of references.
Yeah, and then things sort of turn to carcasses. The smell of burning rubber is from a rabbit carcass the dog dragged into the ravine. And the smell of lemon is the snake root I am crushing between my thumb and forefinger. Some prayers can move even the stubborn dirt. Do you hear? The bird I have never seen is back. It is hard to know the right way in or out. But look, the goldenrod is the color of beaten skin. Like, it always kind of takes this, like, dark, grotesque sort of turn. Something is always rancid, or crushed, or rotten, or burning.
Burning the forest down. Yeah, in that one particularly, the ellipsis is used pretty liberally.
Yeah, it only gets more liberal throughout the book, I feel like.
Especially in that line where you said some prayers can move even the stubborn dirt. Do you hear?
Yeah.
Like, it almost seems like what is that ellipsis doing there? You think? Because I would say like even if she put a period there, I mean it still works. But the ellipsis would imply a stop, a pause, a slowdown, or in the case that she uses them is something a little bit more than that in terms of like a changing of topic or
I don't think it's like a changing of topic there. I think it's like a literal, I'm stopping to listen. Are you listening? Do you hear this?
yeah,
That's how I read
like,
it.
and I mean like what does that do more than like a period would there, or what do you think? Since we
I
don't,
mean, if I probably even wouldn't put a period there. Like, I think it would be silly. Like, I think an ellipsis, I think it's weird. I mean, not really.
could
I
put an
guess
M
I think,
dash,
yeah, I would say an M dash would do the same thing.
but would it
But this
right?
this doesn't bother me at all. Yeah, it would. I think it would. Although you would, I mean, it depends. You could have a space after that M dash.
So the M dash would make it more abrupt, probably, whereas the ellipsis implies taking one's time. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah, a few of the line breaks drove me a little bit crazy, particularly in this one. Maybe because she did try to put, or I mean, she didn't try. She did put it into these tercets, which may have restricted it a little bit.
Yeah, it might have. This one didn't bother me. There are other places where line breaks kind of bugged me a little bit, but not in that poem.
And I guess like the caps on each line threw me a little bit. I don't know if that was just like a publisher thing or
Yeah, that threw me a little bit at first, but I got over it really quickly because it was very consistent.
yeah, I mean it's consistent. It's just
There's no
grammatically,
real, yeah,
yeah,
I mean, there's just no real reason to have them.
right. I wonder if it was just the word processor she was using or
Yeah, I wonder if it was a stylistic choice, but fuck it.
well, because it only occurs when we have actual lines broken down. So every time there's a line broken down, it doesn't really happen in her prose poems. In the prose poems, it follows kind of a typical structure. But yeah, I noticed that, and I was like, I wonder if that was stylistic or just like a oversight on the part of Boa Editions or whatever. Guess because it doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, it doesn't necessarily add anything, but I guess it does. It also doesn't necessarily take anything away. Maybe for those of us that are sticklers. But yeah, I noticed that, and I was, huh. Was that a thing people were doing at this time?
Probably.
Yeah.
She probably wrote a lot of this book in like the late 90s.
Yeah, and some of her publications, it looks like some of the main poems in this, right, were published around like 96 for some of the first ones. And then the
Yeah,
book
it makes
itself,
sense.
and the book itself came out 2004, so
I haven't read her other books. Her first book is hard to find for a reasonable price, but her other book isn't as hard to find. And I have heard that book described, and that one's called Song, right? I feel like I've heard someone once told me that that was the book that it felt like was the book she wrote while she was trying to write The Orchard. That was like the book before The Orchard.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, sometimes it takes multiple. Yeah, I mean, you basically write the book over and over again until you get it right, right? I mean, there's no secret. That's just what it is. Like,
yeah, I mean, people keep
yeah,
revising poems forever,
yeah. Which I don't know if I.
even after they're published.
Yeah, I wonder. I guess that was very big for the modernists. I know, but I guess that trend because I don't really see it happen that much now.
I
Like
mean,
I,
I'm sure people do it.
yeah, but like I'm just thinking like big names or whatever. I don't see somebody like Bedart, like putting out like revised editions of.
No, probably not. I'm just saying, like, people probably put their shit out into journals for the most part. I mean, you don't
Well,
have to, but most people do. And then they keep revising those poems as they're getting ready to put them in a book.
yeah, I mean that part, sure, but I was talking more specifically like, the modernist in particular would constantly, Auden in particular, would do those revisions. So like 20 years later, he would go back and do revisions and then disown the previous version. I
Yeah,
guess,
sometimes you have to for your own pride, man.
yeah,
Especially if like you grow to hate your own poem, right? Like, because it's not just a poem you read somewhere. It's like you came up those with those words. They get stuck in your head. You hear them over and over.
and in the case of Auden in
Like,
particular, I think his revisions didn't really add much, But I guess, well, let's not talk about that if we're gonna. Yeah. All right. What else do you wanna cover in this?
well, were there any poems that you like
The ones
felt
that I would
strongly
ever,
about?
ones that I always like, Sheep Child and then Two Boys were the
Yeah,
two that
those are both
I
important.
really wrote down as.
I would just say that like a poem like so well, I mean, okay, whole pretty much the whole first section of this book to me feels like an invocation of the orchard as a place. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
I think Brightness from the North kind of seals that in for me. Well, maybe, I mean, this whole section does.
Well,
Then we
it
can
has
sort of,
to because
but
I would say that these poems are relatively abstract, so having this location uh, is a necessary thing to make them work. I mean, it has to have this kind of, we're walking through like a dream garden. But yeah. Do you want to talk about Blacklegs, you said?
no, we can talk about Sheep
Sheep
Child.
Child. Okay. Sheep Child.
That's that's like close to the end of the first section.
Yeah, that first. The sheep stands dumb behind the fence, stands dumb, demanding what? Pity, affection, a breast full of milk. That was one of the line breaks that I noticed through second read here. A breast full break of milk. I would break it after breast. A breast full of milk.
Yeah, I get that. It like I don't know. I can hear it sounding fine in my head, but I like that this opens kind of in a way that feels sort of bitchy. I wanted a child. What then? This? The sheep stands dumb behind the fence. Stands dumb. Demanding what? Pity, affection, a breast full of milk. He's up to his neck in his filthy fur.
Yeah, I'm just a stickler for line integrity. So one of my pet peeves. And I could never write something that breaks the phrase in a way that makes it kind of stumble, or it would make a reader stumble, or at least make me stumble.
Yeah, I don't know. I tend to read kind of through and jammed line breaks and just emphasize them a little bit or emphasize like the stresses of the word.
Well, I think
Yeah, I
it,
don't know.
it works better in a few lines down where she says, the pretty picture sliding past. Look, there goes the flowerless larch lurching over the ground like a skiff.
Yeah.
Like, it works better in that way. If, like, yeah, whatever. That's one of my pet
But like
peeves.
I would put my head up to your smelly head and watch the pretty pictures sliding past.
Works
It's a
better in
great
that line,
line.
too, where it says, where it ends on watch. Yeah, it works better in that. Put my head up to your smelly head and watch. Break the pretty picture sliding past. Works better than if, like, yeah, the one at a breast full break of milk. Okay, that's my pet peeve about that shit.
Yeah. And then we get, the crow, the bully bird beating and beating the air with his wide wings as if calling the field to order. There is no order.
Yeah, this is another one where I'm just like, I'm hard pressed to say what this poem is about.
Yeah,
Muttering.
I agree. I think it's about I mean, at first, I think it's about like perceiving and making. I think this one is a little bit looser. I think this one is harder to pin down than the other poems we've talked about so far. Except for I wanted a child, what then? This? You know, like she's referring to something she's essentially made. Right? There is no order. What day of the week is this? Wash day, bake day, what hour of what day? And we have this weird moment. Behind you, flanked by steely thistle, stands the old goat, contemptuous, uninterested, gnawing on the last of a Sunday dress. And I had a goat once, the thought that comes to me. I had a small black goat who pounded his head against a tree until he was dead. His name was Bumblebee. Well, night is coming on. No, it is dead afternoon. But there is something about night in this cloud-shadowed field.
It's another section right there after the bumblebee where the ellipsis is doing a lot of work. That's why I'm fascinated by the kind of structural use of the ellipses in this. His name was Bumblebee, ellipsis. And then we have a completely.
I just find that
move
such a
on.
strange interjection. Like, that's where I feel like, I mean, that's like one of the moments that, like, for me, I was able to cling to that I found a little bit clarifying because I was like, oh, this is actually sort of a stream of consciousness thing. And we have like the speaker envisioning this strange, strange world. But yeah, this one I love, but I struggle with. Except we have perhaps, oh, I would turn this pretty. You see the cowbirds riding the bony heifer by the overturned bathtub. The birds are dung-colored, yes, but when they rise and swim together, they change color, brown to red, the way the light changes color at dusk. Like, that's such a fucking killer moment. And then we get this repeated line, oh sheep, sheep, this is my undoing, that you have a thought and I can read it. Dear monstrous child, I would nurse you if I could, but you are far too large, and I am far too old for such foolishness.
Yeah, the reference to I is doing a lot as well. So when the I comes in this, when do we have it? At the very beginning, very first word. A lot of these poems they kind of invoke the I of a speaker.
Yeah, I mean, we really just lose it for like that sort of middle section on page 22.
Yeah, and if it's called sheep child, like I said, that's why I keep getting brought into mothering, birthing, breastfeeding. It's almost like, yeah, this is like these animals all over the place, fucking a monstrous child, and that's all capped.
Yeah, dear monstrous child.
Is that a reference to something?
I don't know.
So, the fact that it's capped. And I guess sheep is capped towards the end there, but not in any other instance.
I'm sure there's a young adult fiction book that has that somewhere in it.
Sheep?
I mean, dear monstrous child.
I don't know. Fuck young adult fiction. Fucking monster child or whatever. Fucking young adult fiction.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it really starts to get good toward the end of the book where we start to get a lot of, like, dick and tits.
Yeah, well, specifically in section 3, I mean, dick and tits is, like, what mentioned explicitly.
Yeah, you take us to one. I mean, we always have the foreskin.
Yeah.
If you were ever trying to get that into a poem, no, it's been done already.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. So in section 3, we immediately have all this stuff about, more sexual with the foreskin being planted, the dragon, and that's where that poem, The Dragon, on page 47 is the one where they have that line, his tail divided, his skin oiled, the way a male member is oiled by the female's juices.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, where's the first instance of like a hairy sheath?
I think it's the dog penis.
Yeah, where is that though? Oh God. We're probably not going to talk about Pale Rider because that one's just really fucking long. Yeah, I think it probably is in this section.
Well, it's just when it gets very sexual, section 3.
Maybe it's earlier. Maybe it's the wolf. I feel like there's a wolf poem.
Yeah. There's a lot of reference to all that garbage.
All that garbage. All those dicks. All those hairy dog dicks. God, there are so many pregnant bellies too.
Yeah, man, I'm telling you, it's about
Just
birthing.
going through these pages. So many.
Yeah, the dragon was the one that just seemed so obvious to me, and then all these reference to birds and bees and this kind of...
Oh yeah, the birds and the bees I remember in that poem.
Yeah. Well, that's it. She's basically describing a penis.
Yeah.
The bees come out of the junipers, 2 small swarms, the size of melons, and golden, too, like melons. They hung next to each other at the height of a deer's breast, above the wet black compost, and because the light was very bright, it was hard to see them, and harder still to see what hung between them. A snake hung between them. The bees held up a snake, lifting each side of his narrow neck just below the pointed head, and in this way, very slowly, they carried the snake through the garden. The snake's long body hanging down, its tail dragging the ground as if the creature were a criminal, being escorted to execution or a child king to the throne. But yeah, so it's almost like these two like cock and balls like being hovering across the field, right?
Yeah, I remember really enjoying that.
Cock and endless balls. Shout out to Ginsburg.
Cock and endless balls. The dragon.
Yeah. Yeah, and then
Which carries us through the landscape.
That, and then it goes right into, after that. His tail divided, his skin oiled, the way the male member is oiled by the female's juices. The greenness over bright, the bee's gold, the winged serpent moving silently through the air.
Yeah. And right after that, we get the foreskin.
We have an oiled member flying with bee testicles, like melon bee testicles, and then, yeah, dude. And it does take this turn right here in section 3. I was just like, damn, this is just starting to lay the, if we're going with creation or the Ars Poetica thing with this, it's, I mean, of course they're going to throw in that. I mean, you have to, I guess.
I planted the little curl of skin under the magnolia.
Planting
So I had
foreskin.
heard the word and its definition many times when confronted with the tiny curl of flesh. The word did not seem to resemble the thing I held in my hand. Its words so often do not resemble the things they represent. And it had a crust of red, for no one had washed it.
Is that...
So they handed it over in its sullied form, which made it, I thought, more beautiful.
I don't know.
And then I did not know what to do with it, for it seemed of great value to me. The purest portion of the man-child's pleasure returned to God.
The man-child? What is that? I mean, is that a Jewish thing? God, here we go. Here we go mentioning it again, dude. Every fucking episode.
You brought it up this time.
Well, fucking foreskin being saved and cleaned. I mean, there's only one culture that saves the foreskins.
I've known plenty of good Christian men who were circumcised. Thank you.
Well, no. I mean, of course, yeah. I mean, I'm talking more of like, isn't it in the religious practice to save the foreskin though? And like,
oh, I don't fucking know. I just know about
the moil.
I just know the moil. Yeah.
Well, after the moil,
isn't he the one who like sucks on the penis to make it stop bleeding?
Yeah, the moil's the one who performs the act, but it's like
Sucks on that baby dick.
but I think that's, I don't know about all the other ones, but I think that's the one where you actually literally save it as if you would like a tooth or something, you know, like a baby tooth, or like, am I just making
I'm
this
sure.
up?
Probably not.
So I don't
Sounds
know.
right.
All right.
I think they like there's also like a practice of bathing in milk somewhere in there, but I don't know.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. It's a ceremony, so I didn't know if they do take it, and I didn't know if it was a reference to any of that, but I guess it doesn't matter. I guess we just had to mention the Jewish thing on every episode, so
Yeah, I just think there might be some kind of swishing involved. I don't know by whom or with what. It sounds like it probably happens.
yeah. And then there's this reference to ancient covenants, right? Like folded into this piece of flesh. So I don't know. It just made me think of that because I mean, yeah, I mean all the Christian. I mean it's American, yeah. So all the Americans that have circumcisions that just do it not necessarily for religious, but just because. I mean, uh, but yeah, I mean that's like the one religion where it's like a huge deal. It's like part of the practice, right? Is like this covenant between like removing the foreskin of the child.
Damn, so is this how the orchard was made, according to her sort of myth making? The
Maybe.
foreskin? So I planted it in the black dirt at the crest of the field, and then I planted the magnolia over it. That was the order. First the little petal, now dried, then the new bush. And in 1 year or two, the bush made blossoms that began as furred buds.
Yeah, I mean it goes along with the creation, but yeah.
Yeah, this feels very much like a world building sort of book. A world and myth building sort of book.
The foreskin, and then the next poem is the title poem, so the orchard. So I don't know. I mean, it could be.
I like this poem, but I wasn't as in love with this poem as I was others.
Yeah, title poems are often tend to be that way. I don't know.
It was good. Again, it's like a longer poem that is good, but like definitely not one of the best of this book, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think this poem, The Orchard, could have been served better in the prose form. Really, I think almost all these poems would have been served better in the prose form, but
She does do the prose form very well.
yeah, well, for this particular content, for this particular kind of dreamlike garden landscape, it just, yeah, almost like I just, as I read through this for the second time, I was struck by the prose poems just being felt like more complete poems than the other the ones that are. I mean, because there's only a few that even have stanzas, right? I mean, the rest are just kind of this long.
Yeah, it's like I can't tell if this poem is like trying really hard to give greater order to the book. Like, I don't know.
One of the other things she does is she uses a lot of sentence structure to, I mean, to her advantage in this, where she alternates between these long, short sentences, sometimes not even sentences, right? She'll just alternate depending.
Well, at the beginning, she has a ton of shorts. Like, at the beginning of The Orchard, it's like, I saw the dog in a dream. Huge, white, bony creature, big as a horse. At first, I thought it was a horse. It was feeding on apples, as a horse might, though not with a horse's patience. For it was starving. Like, those are all separate sentences, even though many of them are fragments. And it continues that way until about halfway down the first page. Windfall from the orchard above the lake, pitiful place. The few trees there grow black and yellow, and the thin grasses stagger down to the abandoned north field. Yeah, see, then we get this long ass sentence
And that's,
that goes on for many, many lines. And like that's fucking impressive.
and at the end of this, I think there's like a direct reference to the birth of Christ. And she talks about the smell.
Yeah, as though she's holding the heart of some like the semi beating heart of some holy being.
Well, and just like the reference of And the heart was heavy and wet, and it smelled as it would smell forever of myrrh and burning blood and gold. So myrrh, gold, frankincense,
Yeah.
the gifts from the wise men at the birth of Christ. So the story goes. So this direct reference to those specific things, but she adds the burning blood,
Yeah, a lot of burning.
which
A lot of
just
burning.
feeds into the
That's what it is.
creation thing too. Like I think if we're gonna go with this meaning as ars poetica or creation, it's like, of course, she references these different type of like myth, like creation myths, and I guess like yeah, there's like with the Greek mythology, and then with the kind of religious mentionings and like those creation myths. But it's not so obvious. I mean, I think it's very subtly done, very small. Like,
Yeah, I like that the gestures here are largely subtle, you know? They
well,
don't
yeah,
over, I mean, not all of them. Like in Mask, they're very, very in your face, but like it also is very explicitly that and doesn't like try to hide it. It's just like, I'm making a gesture to Christ here.
and
I'm saying
specifically the
so out
birth
here.
of it. So yeah, I mean the birth of a king, right? That's why they brought him those gifts, because that's what, at least that's how the story goes.
We must play with passion our two parts, Lazarus undone, and that good fellow Christ, hard fellow Christ. Oh, do not lose faith. Work it out, work it out.
And I guess you could talk about, if we wanted to go further into it. Yeah, I mean, the immaculate conception type thing, like this
Yeah.
birthing without sex,
Yeah, well,
birthing,
that's where it starts. Or, I mean, you know,
right? And the reference to the foreskin, and
yeah. God, Mask is a good poem, dude. Dear God, to be more than a light-hearted jest, or a hard-hearted jest, my crow, my lark, my winsome wren, my chough. O sweet-lipped one, who keeps me to a task I do not want. Let me be more than a dove-witted fool. If the seam is good, if the seam is good. Then the heart will put on for a moment its royal robes and become a grave man standing before an open crypt with an air of such command the stained burial wrappings of one much loved and maligned and many days dead will drop away, the self step blind from its watery grave, and there will be no time, nor crow, nor Lazarus, nor Christ, nor the hand that writes this.
yeah, and that's the last one of section 2 before we get into like the super sexual one,
Yeah.
section 3.
So that makes for a pretty, I would say, reasonable lead into section 3. We're talking about what feels like very much an image of fertility.
I mean, it has to be, and it's loose. I mean, that's my biggest criticism, is that it's so loose. It's walking this line where it could easily fall into obscurity.
It could, and it has its moments, but I think largely it does a really impressive job of pulling something so strange together and like really pulling it off and pulling it off well. And that it's so vivid too. Like it's so fucking hard to create such a singularly vivid world in which your entire collection takes place.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of these loosely connected kind of scenes through a garden, if I had to call it anything. Which is why I kind of agree with Sophie that the most satisfied interpretation is, okay, if this is about creation or the act of creation.
Yeah, it is the most satisfying because it's right.
Yeah, that, and I mean, yeah, there's little else. There's nothing else there for.
Well, yeah, if you don't have that, like, I remember when we first read this, and some of the people we were also reading it with were like, oh, I didn't read it that way, but now I do. And I'm like,
Really?
yeah, like, what were you clinging to before? You know?
Dude, I
How
barely.
else do you read this? I
Yeah.
don't know how else to read this. But the gestures toward making and toward things that are otherwise common tropes in poems. Like, birds.
Yeah, they do love them some birds, dude. Poets love themselves some
Fucking
birds.
songbirds.
Yeah. Fucking songbirds. Fucking birds.
That's why it always struck me when like Berryman would like write water birds or something in a poem. Fucking water birds.
Yeah, well, in that poem Two Boys, I think there might be a little nod to Berryman. Like, in this one where it's almost like, are there... Two Boys is the one that made me think, is there more than one speaker in these poems? Because I guess it's hard to tell, but it's not so much call and answer like Berryman, but...
You mean like where she uses italics?
No, I mean in the way she structures the sentence, and it no accident, it already raining,
Oh yeah. The
which
syntax.
is a huge, like a drastic change in the rest of the book in terms of how she writes the syntax. Like just those two, that one little tiny sentence or fragment of a sentence, and then that last little fragment. It already raining. I mean, sounds like a huge, huge Berryman nod.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I buy in that easily.
Yeah, that was just the first thing I came to, but it seems deliberate because it's a drastic variation on the syntax, and she doesn't use it almost anywhere else. It's just in this Two Boys poem. And this is one where I did start to think to myself, like, okay, like, is this two speakers? Are there characters that they're trying to, or that she's trying to bring in?
Well, there are otherwise occurrences of like a couple of boys running around. I think maybe in the poem The Orchard.
There's
The
boys
boy
walking
drowned in the
around
bog.
with their circumcised penises,
Yeah,
planting bushes.
drowned boys.
Yeah, planting the foreskin in the bush. I mean, I guess you could go really sexual with all that.
The boy drowned in the bog. Not a pretty sight, not a pretty end. And it no accident.
Right. Well,
And
so I mean,
him, a stranger in town.
but so, I mean, it's such an abrupt change in the syntax. Like it's such an abrupt, and it's like the one of the only instances. There's two instances in this poem of it, and that's it. So yeah,
This one's good though. This one's one of the best.
yeah. This was one of the ones I pulled out to me.
Rank the berries in the bushes and mute the birds. Not like birds at all.
Yeah. And then yeah, there were a couple poems where I just wrote "what the fuck" at the top and at the bottom. These are just exercises.
But not on this one.
Not on Two Boys. I wrote it on Windfall at the beginning and at the end. Where I was just like, I don't know what this is. I can't find it now, of course. There's only like, 15 poems in this thing, and of course I can't find it.
Oh yeah, this is the one where we get that weird repetition from
Which one?
Two Boys is like where we get a weird repetition of a sheep child.
Yeah.
The boy had wanted a brother, but this was not what he meant. Had he said the wrong words? Did words have such power? That's what I mean. This is a fucking Ars Poetica. You don't say that in a poem and not have it be about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's the only thing you can come to. Like, it's the only thing that has any type of consistent thing, yeah. When you get to the end of these poems, you're like, all right, well, what did I just read?
Yeah, but I feel like when you read it with that lens, it's so easy to read it. It's so much easier. Am I wrong? They feel suddenly somehow more grounded to you?
I mean, no, but putting the Ars Poetica, I mean, it's so broad, of course. Like, it's. So if we say that, yeah, it's just about creating, well, then we can just do whatever. Then what the fuck is the fish? Yeah, what about the italics? I guess we haven't talked about any of the italics, and that's another trope that keeps coming up. Is that representing spoken? What do you think?
I mean, I took that to be like monologue that's like supposed to be interior, like to the poem or to the speaker of the poem.
Right. So some type of thought, or yeah,
Yeah.
clearly meant to indicate something. But yeah,
Well, I mean, yeah, I just took that to be internal thought here. Or like sometimes, I mean, I think there was maybe one place where I read it as an emphasis, but it was like my least favorite. Like I remember liking that poem, but not the way it ended. Because it ends with, "Oh, self." It might be sheet music. Because I think it's the end of the first section. Yeah.
yeah,
It's sheet music. "Oh, self." That one ends in italics.
yeah. And the very, I would almost too many ellipses in that last stanza too.
Yeah, I would agree with that one. I would agree with that judgment.
I am, and in this case too, like this case, it does confuse me a little bit how the ellipses are used. I wonder if it means anything that they're also four dots instead of the traditional three. But
Well, four dots just indicates the end of the sentence. Three dots you use when the sentence is going to continue after the ellipsis.
okay, well that clears that up then. So yeah, I mean she is using them as periods then. Well, I guess she uses
Yeah,
them as interchangeably as periods or subject markers.
but there are places where she uses it, like in plants fed on by fawns. She uses a four period ellipsis after immediately following a question mark. That's page 53.
Right, which is where she would use it more. That's what I mean. There's like this liberal use of
And
it. It's
that
not
that's confusing to me because I'm like, wait.
right. It's not entirely clear. I wonder if it. I guess we could explain it away. We could say, oh, it's just stylistic, but
I don't know
uh,
why I would assume in that case you would chop off one of the periods in the ellipsis and like you could keep that question mark and it would still be four dots, but maybe that's not how it works. She probably knows better than I do. Knew
or
because she's dead.
well, yeah. I mean, in that particular case too, you're talking about that line of and then the changing of the guard. Ellipses, no break. The flies
Yeah.
do not trouble me. Yeah, I mean, I would say like that ellipsis is doing very little. It may be one of the weakest
Yeah.
uses of it. It's maybe one of the weakest uses in
Seems
this book.
unnecessary.
Yeah. So in which
But
case
it
we would
seems like
explain
she
it.
thought really, really hard about it.
So in which case we would explain it away as a stylistic thing, which
Yeah, 'cause she uses it so much though. Like, there's a lot.
well, that's why it stood out to me because I think she's using it in a couple different ways.
Like Sparrow's
Uh,
Gate, there's a lot of M dashes, and at the very end, there's a lot of ellipses.
right. She uses it in a couple different ways, but it's very loosely like used in some instances, and like the one you just pointed out, it's almost seems unnecessary.
It is unnecessary
Yeah.
there, I think. But I think this is a good book. I really like this book. I would read it again. I will read it again in a handful of years. And there are poems here that I will always fucking go back to. Like, I will always, like, the first section of this book, I will always really love. I think I need to spend more time with the third section, get really deep into that foreskin, those dick and balls,
Yeah, dude.
that dick and
Jesus.
balls.
God.
I mean, it's the only time where that shit becomes acceptable to, like, we were talking about, like, poems about jerking off and how we've seen too many of those
Yeah.
lately. I'm like, whatever. If you write those, like, fucking whatever. I just probably won't read your poems, and
Yeah.
that's fine.
Just boring.
But yeah, when you at least make like a really interesting image out of sex organs, and then it becomes interesting. You know?
Well, and then it's that she's not even really referencing masturbation.
No, she's not.
Yeah. Whereas masturbation is like you're not really creating anything in that sense. So I mean, yeah, it makes sense that this is kind of absence.
It's just so much better.
Masturbation poems, dude. I masturbate. I pleasure myself.
Well, I'm talking about something else, but also in this poem, I'm gonna let you know that I'm jerking it.
Jerking it. And I'm proud.
I'm really proud, but also I'm really ashamed.
Yeah, look at
Because I'm a man.
Look at my cum.
Yeah,
Oh, what an image.
those are always really sad poems.
What an image.
Sad poems.
Even worse if they use the word explosion,
So I'm edgy
electric.
and I'm sad.
Yeah, anything. I can't even read the word electric to describe something anymore without cringing. It's just cliche. Explosion. Yeah, just can't handle that anymore. I just cringe. It's like, this is now a cliche. Too much use. I see this often with like more in prose writing, but yeah, the feeling of my touch electric. I'm like,
Though I feel like this is something Stephen King does.
Well, Stephen King,
especially when he's like writing about like teens fucking.
Yeah, preteens in that case. Yeah, yeah.
No, I just read. I was just reading some other like short story of his. I think it's called The Raft. And I think they were actually teenagers in that one.
Right. Yeah, well, that's seen in It's the one he gets shit for now by the Twitter police, but yeah, because they probably haven't read his short stories. But yeah, that's different though too, because yeah, it's a different
Stephen
way.
King loves to write about kids fucking though.
Yeah.
By kids I mean teens.
Well, just sex in general. He's
But he's also like not good at it.
yeah. Yeah. Well, his problem is always overwriting.
Yeah.
So, remember Toni Morrison always said this. Bret Easton Ellis has said this. A lot of other writers that we consider kind of straddling that line between literary and popular. I guess Morrison doesn't necessarily straddle that line as much. She's well on into literary, but I would say she does because those books became very popular bestsellers, movies made and stuff. But yeah, they always, both of those have said in their own words, Morrison and Bret Easton Ellis have said, when you write about sex, just keep it as sterile as possible, because if you get too descriptive, it starts to get cringe, cheesy real fast. Like it starts to just get like, yeah, keep it sterile and let the reader project what they're like visualizing into it. Because otherwise it just starts like, you start getting dirty romance novel if you start getting too descriptive, like quivering member, or like oiled by the female's juices, right?
Yeah, that was like kind of funny though.
Yeah, milky white breasts.
Oh my god. I can't.
Milk trucks.
Yeah. So that's The Orchard.
Yeah, any other thoughts on The Orchard? So, final thoughts? Complaints?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like a weird pose for an author photo. Like, I'm not sure what's going on here.
Poets have some weird photos on their books, man. Like,
it's just like a really weird angle for her body too. Like, what's her leg doing here?
The turtleneck.
What's in front of her? There's a lot going on there that confuses the image a little bit. Is this?
It's very 90s with like the light wash jeans and like a turtleneck from like JCPenney or whatever.
Yeah, and that's like a legit turtleneck. And it's not like she doesn't have it like folded over once to make it more comfortable. Like it's just scrunched up. It's like unrolled, scrunched up, like straight up turtleneck. Not like a sweater. Like a fitted turtleneck.
It looks like some foliage falling into the crotch, like.
Yeah, I can't tell. That might be like a design of the book. I can't tell.
It is unusual,
but it's confusing. It's like a really unusual pose.
It is unusual to have an author photo show so much body.
Well, the leg doesn't need to be here.
Right,
Like,
that's
we
what
could
I
have just
mean.
cut this image off.
That's what I mean. Just like a headshot is usually what you'll see, like not necessarily like a full.
Whenever people show their whole bodies for an author photo, it's weird, right? Like, it's kind of weird.
Unnecessary.
And then we kind of judge it. We're like, well, I don't need to see your whole body. You're not that important.
Yeah, I guess unless you use it to sell things. Whatever. All right, I guess we're done. Anything else?
No.
Yeah, whatever.
There you go.
All right, so that was The Orchard. Reminder to audience, listeners, we're looking for workshop horror stories. Email your workshop horror story to heavyboardpodcast@gmail.com. Hopefully we'll get some good ones and we can start going into this on future episodes and have a little segment at the end here where we go into have a good time with these workshop stories. If you want to contact us, you can contact us at heavyboardpodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe to our Patreon to receive full uncensored episodes for subscribers only. Check out our YouTube channels for more. Links to all the books and shit in the description. Links to all the books and shit in the description. And what are we doing next episode? So,
I mean, we haven't nailed it down yet, but we're thinking about some Stephen King, I think.
yeah, I'd like to do the Stephen King's The Shining just because I think we should just make a statement, just straight up, just go from this highbrow poetry to garbage pop. Like I just want to. I like the idea of making that statement.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, this episode's kind of difficult.
So, I mean, you gotta throw the listeners a bone, dude. I mean, I don't know. I mean, most of our listeners may be poetry fans, but we try to cover it all because I think not enough podcasts, not enough anything really covers literature as a whole. I don't know what that is. Is that MFA programs, you think, that like forces fiction and poetry to be so separate, like all of a sudden?
I don't think it's all of a sudden either, though. I think like non-poets just don't like poetry mostly. I think that's all it is, dude. I think people who don't write poetry don't really like it that much, and mostly don't read it. Like, they don't read it for entertainment. Why would you? We do. We're assholes.
Yeah, you come here to listen to it, to tell you how you're supposed to think about it. Fucking heavy and bored. Heavy and bored.
Yeah, both of those.
Heavy and bored. Heavy and bored.
Extra head since I went to the beach and then I broke my toe. So now I haven't been working out for like 2 weeks. And now I broke my toe. And I was like, oh, well, I guess I can't now.
Do it one-footed, dude.
Yeah, one-footed yoga.
Alright, I guess we should wrap up so we stop saying stuff we have to cut out.
Damn, did you not stop recording?
Nah. I usually, we do our sign-off.
Oh, shit.
I already recorded at least enough of that. Contact us at Heavy Board. Give us a Metamucil sponsorship if you know anybody.
I really need one of those. It's so expensive these days.
That and/or.
Because I like the sugar-free stevia one.
You have to,
just in
dude.
case anyone cares. Because I'm trying not to consume too much aspartame. But the stevia one costs like 10 extra bucks.
Yeah, dude, you want to limit that sugar intake, especially with supplements. You don't want to be supplementing your body with more sugar.
Yeah, I consume a lot of it.
But yeah, reach out to us. With workshop horror stories, reach out to us if for any reason you got something to add, ideas. We like to hear from our listeners. Heavyboardpodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe to our Patreon to receive full uncensored episodes for subscribers. check out and subscribe to our YouTube channels for more links to all the books and shit we talk about in the description, as well as the stuff we're going to do next week. And next week we're pretty much we're going to do Stephen King's The Shining, I believe. So a little bit of fun. And we might, it'd be interesting, Sophie, if because it's such like a fast reading stuff, talking about the movie could be interesting as well.
Yeah.
Which King famously hated. Famously didn't like the movie version.
I'm sure it'll come up.
Yeah.
Naturally. I'm sure it'll come up anyway.
Yeah. It has to, because the ending was drastically changed in the movie, and I think that's why King hates it. But yeah, we'll talk about that. I'll save all my opinions on that for later, next episode. All right, yeah. So this has been Heavy Board. My name's Andrew Whitstadt.
Sophie Weiner.
And I guess we'll see you next episode.
Or not.
Yeah, or not.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy.
Bored.
I may say the male is entirely hostile. No! Inner.
Resources.
Life, friends, is boring. We must not say so. Are you radioactive now?
Inner.
Resources. American resources.
Being bored?
Some activities are intentional, right?
It shows such a lack
Heavy.
of gratitude for life. Bored. I aspire to boredom,
Heavy.
I should say.
Bored. Heavy.
I am heavy.
Bored.
Has you the night sweats and the day sweats, pal? Pal, I do.